We have a very risky job, and we think you're the only man who can pull it off and survive. 24-year-old Sergeant Carlos Hathcock was just a few days from finishing his tour in Vietnam and returning home to his wife and young son when an unfamiliar Marine captain asked him to volunteer for a top-secret mission. When he tried to ask for details, Hathcock was only told, "You have to accept or reject this request, based totally on the prospect that it will be extremely hazardous. The odds of your survival are slim, so I can only ask you to volunteer." By the time Hathcock received this request from the captain in early 1967, he was already a living legend. During his 6 months as a sniper, he recorded 80 confirmed kills, operating from his home base at Hill 55, 10 miles southwest of the port city of Da Nang. Hathcock never relished the prospect of killing people, but he did so to protect his fellow Marines from being killed by the enemy. He knew he was the best in the business. To refuse to volunteer would result in a less experienced friend being asked to do the job instead. After accepting the assignment, Hathcock received instructions to assassinate a North Vietnamese divisional general at his headquarters. Hathcock shook his head and asked his spotter, Lance Corporal John Burke, "How on earth did I ever get myself into this one?" Carlos Norman Hathcock II was born on the 20th of May, 1942, in Little Rock, Arkansas. As a boy, growing up in the aftermath of the Second World War, he heard stories of the heroism of the U.S. Marine Corps in the Pacific War against Japan and dreamed of joining the Marines himself. He learned to shoot at a young age, and after being given a rifle for his 10th birthday, he hunted squirrels and rabbits to provide food for his impoverished family. On his 17th birthday, Hathcock fulfilled his childhood dream and enlisted in the Marines. He soon began competing in shooting competitions and was awarded the accolade of Distinguished Marksman for his competition successes. In August 1965, he crowned his achievement by winning the prestigious Wimbledon Cup for long-distance shooting at Camp Perry in Ohio. The following April, Hathcock deployed to Vietnam, where he initially served as a military policeman. In October, he was recruited into Captain Jim Land's unit of sniper instructors in the 1st Marine Division. An effective marksman, Land championed the use of snipers among the Marines and established a sniper training school in the United States, where he taught Hathcock in 1961. Hitting the target was only one part of the sniper's job. He had to know how to move about and remain undetected. He would only have one chance to hit his target. A miss would betray his position and attract enemy fire. Patience and a cool head were essential if a sniper hoped to survive the engagement. One of the main tasks for Captain Land's snipers was to track down a notorious female sniper commander known to the Marines as the Apache for her sadistic torture methods. After an unsteady start, on one November evening, Hathcock and Land saw the silhouettes of a group of Viet Cong guerrillas coming over the top of a hill, heading in their direction. Among them was a woman who appeared to be squatting down and relieving herself. After identifying her as the Apache, Land called an artillery strike against the position. Seriously wounded, and with 3 of her men dead, she ran down the hill directly towards the 2 Marines. Hathcock fired 2 shots to stop her in her tracks before dispatching one of her comrades. While some historians have questioned the existence of the Apache, there was no doubt that the Marine snipers quickly caused a stir among the communists around Hill 55. In particular, they feared a man they nicknamed Du Kich Long Trong, or the White Feather Sniper. This was none other than Hathcock, who wore a white feather in his hat as a trophy from one of his fallen victims. By the beginning of 1967, White Feather had over 60 confirmed kills, including a French collaborator and a Chinese colonel. Hathcock's incredible success troubled not only the communists, but his own commanding officer. The North Vietnamese army produced a leaflet with images of Hathcock and Land, promising a bounty of several $1,000 for either of their heads. An infuriated Captain Land made plans to return to the United States and restricted Hathcock's activities for his own safety, with limited success. Over the following weeks, several Marines on Hill 55 fell victim to sniper fire. Land believed that the North Vietnamese sent a platoon of snipers targeting his men, and his suspicions were confirmed when a female prisoner informed the Marines that a dozen snipers had sworn a blood oath to go after White Feather. The woman claimed that the sniper who did the most damage was a man who lived in the jungle and wrestled snakes to death with his bare hands before eating them raw. The Americans duly nicknamed him Cobra. 3 days before Land's scheduled departure, another Marine was shot by sniper fire from across the valley. The captain decided to send Hathcock and Burke after Cobra. The two men went into the jungle, attempting to track down the enemy sniper, knowing full well that Cobra might also be after them. As they followed his trail, darkness was falling in, and they decided to spend the night in the jungle. The following day, they followed the trail right up to a cave with a bed of dried grass. Hathcock sensed that he was being led into a trap and felt that Cobra was awaiting them. As the Americans circled the ridge above the cave, they heard a rustling sound behind them, which alerted them to the presence of the enemy sniper and quickly took cover. Hathcock and Burke eventually found themselves on a ridge on the opposite side of a clearing from their previous position, which Cobra now occupied. As Hathcock attempted to work his way up a tree to get a view of his adversary, the Vietnamese sniper caught sight of his White Feather and fired. Hathcock turned around to see Burke lying motionless. While Burke was convinced that he had been hit and felt warm blood running down his leg, Hathcock noticed that it was not blood, but water. The bullet grazed Burke's hip and shot through his canteen of water. As Cobra hurried to take up a new position, Hathcock was sure that his rival was in the gully below. For an hour, Hathcock and Burke scanned the gully for any sign of the enemy, while down below, Cobra was doing exactly the same. The Vietnamese sniper once again spied the White Feather and took aim. But the late afternoon sun was shining at him, and he lost sight of his target. As Cobra tried to locate the White Feather in the scope of his Russian Mosin Nagant rifle, Hathcock glimpsed an object glistening in the sun. Although neither he nor Burke could be certain it was Cobra, Hathcock decided to take a shot. Through his binoculars, Burke saw the man collapse in the gully. When they reached the dead man, Burke discovered that Hathcock's bullet had passed through Cobra's scope and entered his eye. While the exploit further cemented his fame, Hathcock immediately realized that he could only have pulled off such a shot if Cobra had been aiming directly at him. He told Burke, "When you get down to it, the only difference between me and him is I got on the trigger first." Hathcock and Burke returned to Hill 55 to show Cobra's rifle to Captain Land, who returned to the States the very next day. Though Hathcock was near the end of his own tour of duty, he continued to be busy. In March 1967, he and Burke were sent to Elephant Valley, north of Da Nang, where they encountered a company of some 150 North Vietnamese army soldiers. As the enemy column advanced, Hathcock killed the NVA commander at its head with his first shot, while Burke fired at the rear of the column. While the communist troops took cover in a ditch, the two men shifted their positions to keep the enemy guessing. Over the next 5 days, without any immediate support, the pair of Marines repulsed every attempt by the communists to storm their position, picking off enemy soldiers one by one. They eliminated more than a third of the enemy force before calling in artillery and infantry support to finish the job. By April, Hathcock was ready to return home. His wife, Josephine, found out about his exploits from the newspapers and angrily demanded that he stop putting himself in danger. However, His sense of duty led him to accept the mission to kill the Vietnamese general. This was a challenge far beyond the Apache, Elephant Valley, or even the cunning Cobra. The reconnaissance photos showed that the old French plantation house, which served as the general's headquarters, was surrounded by open fields with no cover for over 2,000 yards. Even an experienced long-distance shot like Hathcock could not expect to hit his target from such a distance. He would have to crawl on open ground for up to 1,500 yards before he could be sure of getting his man. There was no question of wearing the white feather for this one. After flying for over an hour towards Laos, Hathcock dropped from the helicopter with a squad of Marines and was escorted into position. He crawled his way through the tree cover and reached the edge of the open ground by sunset, where he could see the heavily defended compound. Until he made it to his desired firing position, he could not sleep or eat, and could only afford small and infrequent sips of water. As he inched through the dry grass, he heard an enemy patrol approaching him. He glanced behind at the trail of broken glass and sensed that he was done for, but did everything he could to remain as still and as quiet as possible. Though he heard footsteps near him as the guards patrolled the perimeter of the compound, he noticed they were just chatting and not looking for anything. The following morning, Hathcock saw the corpulent general leave the house in a white Citroen. By the time he returned, Hathcock made steady progress and was now 500 yards from the tree line. He was covered in ant bites and began to wonder whether they would kill him before the enemy did. The evening patrol once again passed close to him as they made their way to the perimeter, taking no notice of the sniper beneath their feet. By daybreak on the third day, Hathcock was 1,200 yards away. By the end of the day, he would arrive at his desired firing position, planning to take his shot at first light the following morning, before escaping via a shallow gully into the trees. His confidence was soon shattered when he found a green bamboo viper right in front of him. Fighting against every instinct to get away from the venomous snake, Hathcock remained still. Miraculously, his serpentine companion slithered away and allowed him to resume his steady progress. Hathcock's whole body was covered in blisters and insect bites from 3 days of crawling through the grass. After briefly considering whether he could take his shot at 1,000 yards, Hathcock decided to stick to the original plan and reached the gully by the end of the day, where he prepared his firing position 800 yards from the target. Not long after sunrise, Hathcock saw a patrol heading straight towards him. His heart was in his mouth, and he planned to shoot the general through his window and sacrifice his own life in the process. He watched in disbelief as the patrol veered away at the last moment. He had little time to relax, as he soon heard the roar of the Citroen's engine preparing to take the general out to his morning inspection. The short and fat general made for a big target as he stepped outside the house, and Hathcock aimed his trusty Winchester Model 70 rifle at his left breast, taking account of the breeze. He was just about to pull the trigger when the general's young aide-de-camp stepped in front of the commander. Hathcock cursed the young officer, who soon stepped aside. The sniper squeezed the trigger and unleashed his .30-06 Springfield projectile, which flew across the open ground and killed its target instantly. Hathcock slid across the gully and made his escape, happy in the realization that the North Vietnamese guards had no clue where the fatal shot had come from. After making his way to the trees, he scampered through the jungle to his pickup point. There, his Marine escort collected him and informed him that all hell was breaking loose in the North Vietnamese army. He received a hero's welcome at Hill 55 before returning home to his family. Although he initially acceded to his wife's request by leaving the Marines, Hathcock longed to return to action, and by 1969, he was back in Vietnam, leading a sniper platoon. On the 16th of September, he was traveling in an armored vehicle when it struck a mine. Hathcock rescued 7 of his colleagues from the burning wreck and was awarded a Purple Heart. But his career as a sniper was over. He had 93 confirmed kills to his name, while his logbook claims over 300 victims. After his recovery, Hathcock worked as an instructor at the Marine Corps Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia, until 1975, when he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. His loss of mobility forced him to retire from the Marines in 1979, and the disease eventually claimed his life a few months short of his 57th birthday in 1999. More than 2 decades after his premature death, Carlos Hathcock remains a legend in the Marine Corps as the deadliest sniper in American history.